17. But as the time of the promise drew near, which God had granted to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt until there arose over Egypt another king who did not know Joseph. He dealt shrewdly with our race and forced our fathers to expose their infants so that they would not be kept alive. At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight, and he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. And when he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in his words and deeds. When he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. And seeing one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man and avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed that his brothers would understand that God was giving them salvation by his hand, but they did not understand. And on the following day he appeared to them as they were quarreling and tried to reconcile them, saying, Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong each other? But the man who was wronging his neighbor thrust him aside, saying, Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? At this retort, Moses fled and became an exile in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. I'm going to stop there so we can discuss that.
Okay, now are we to discuss the story or the story inside the story?
The story inside the story. That's an excellent question there. As a recap, this is Stephen who is telling this story. So the story is that he's telling the story, as you said, of what is happening. And this is more than just a fireside chat that Stephen is just talking. And people are just, listening and saying, "Ooh, tell us the story." But that rather, this is actually a trial that Stephen is on, and he's on the witness stand, and he is building up to an accusation, and he kind of puts the accusations that the elders and the scribes and the council here is basically being accused. So while they were accusing Stephen, he's actually turning it on them and accusing them. So we get into starting at 20, and it says, At this time Moses was born and was beautiful in God's sight. So has everyone got that way? Is that worded the same way in your translations?
Lovely.
Lovely.
Was pleasing to God.
So,
It was exceeding fair.
why? Why put this? Why is Stephen putting this summary phrase in here? What is this pleasing? As in, well, since we're Jews, we know Moses does great things, therefore he's pleasing. Or is he talking about his physical attributes? Why is it even brought up? It seems weird to me. In a summary, that you would put this in. And I don't have an answer. I really don't know.
Of course, it's easy to say this looking back, but it must be a case where he was, there was an element of preordained,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
preparing him.
Yeah.
Well, Joseph and Moses were rejected by the nation of Israel, but yet they turned out to be great leaders for the Lord. And I think Stephen's bringing out the fact that you're of your fathers, and it comes out finally saying your fathers killed the prophets that prophesied of coming Messiah. And so he's just bringing out, but the things that he's accused of, he's bringing back. It's actually saying you're guilty of what you're accusing me of.
Right. So is it implied that if you're beautiful and pretty, and God has accepted you?
Sure. I'm just
He goes on vacation and he comes back.
Yeah.
and knows it all.
Well, they said Stephen looked like an angel,
Or vice versa, God only accepts the lovely. It seems an odd positioning to put this description here. And I wish I knew kind of more of what...
Jesus himself, they said, didn't come with all these nice attributes that
Right.
people would just be drawn to him.
Right.
He looks like just a regular, ordinary guy, you know.
And what,
But I wonder-
some
But
speculation
Jim,
that-
what is your description doesn't say, it doesn't
Use
mean physical, I mean, it's,
Well, it says it was, what verse is it?
20.
There. And was pleasing to God, was born and was pleasing to God.
yeah.
But is that his sight was pleasing?
Was well pleasing, sorry.
Well, aha.
But it doesn't say, you know, hey, the child's born and he's healthy, I'm pleased, you know, who knows?
Doesn't seem fair.
But I wonder if Stephen's trying to throw an extra, because he kind of mentioned it was coordinated, preordained, because you had, like again, the hindsight thing, Moses, everybody knows the story of Moses, even at this time. And I think he's trying to say, not only Moses did good things from age 40 onward, or actually it's after that, but he going back even further, saying God planned this from day one, and you still missed it.
Yeah, he was set apart, maybe, it was
I guess
more
kind of the-
something along those lines.
Yeah.
Noticeable. Okay.
To give a little extra polish
Right.
to Moses when he's talking about it. I don't know.
I was just thinking too, how, after Jesus' resurrection, he told the disciples how the Old Testament spoke of him in Moses, and then were types of Jesus. Joseph was in Moses, and he used both those types to maybe a connection.
And I think he's also given them evidence that they can't dispute, right? Because Moses was their dude. I mean, that, you know, Moses was probably even before,
Yeah,
even
Moses and
greater
the
than
law
Abraham.
and the prophets, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just like the guy saying about Moses, he's saying, well, who's made you to rule? And he was rejected at the beginning before, doing anything great. Well, who made you rule over us?
Yeah, here's a translation note on, it said, some people said it could be translated, was well formed before God, or was well pleasing to God, or another one even said well bred, as far as God was concerned.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Mhm.
Something to just add to the pile of
Yeah.
possibilities there.
Yeah.
And so into the next sentence, and it was brought up for 3 months in his father's house, and when he was exposed. Now that's the second time the word exposed
Yeah.
was used, because up early in 19 he dealt truly this other king with our race and forced our fathers to expose their infants. So I don't know. The word exposed to me, I'm mentally thinking disclosed. You get unclothed.
Yeah.
It's
Disrobed.
Disrobed. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Is that what is meaning here by this? And when he was exposed.
Well, I think we know the history of I forget who it was, that declared, get rid of all the babies.
Right.
So I think they, they hid them away. And sometimes you do that for babies anyway, because
You wrap them in that.
you wrap them up, but also, I mean, my generation anyway, you didn't bring a baby outside the house until, was it 6 weeks, 9 weeks? I don't remember the exact. There was a time that all women knew you don't bring your baby out in public until 6 weeks or 8, 9 weeks.
So that's what happened to my children.
Yeah, but it's something to do with the vaccinations and all that stuff. At least by my mom era,
Yeah.
and even my wife knows that type of stuff. And I think even in the old days, in Nigeria they're still very, very old. They didn't take they didn't even name their babies until they hit almost the first birthday.
Yeah,
Because there was
because
so
of
much mortality.
Yeah, I was going to say infant mortality. Was,
Yeah, and so I can understand that they would keep them closed up and hidden. But I think, that, especially they knew that if they brought their babies to light, so to speak, they would have been killed because of the king's decree. So I don't see anything nefarious in this. It's just the statement that he was exposed to the ruling class.
and using that king's edict of killing the firstborn,
Right.
the male that's where it was hidden.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
now
I'm
they've
assuming
exposed
Moses
the
was the
child.
firstborn. I don't know if he was necessarily. I don't recall. I know Aaron was his younger brother.
I think so, because,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the story of Moses being hidden in the basket and floated
In the
down the
reeds,
river kind of
yeah.
thing.
Right, right.
And what drove that was he was the firstborn
Yeah.
of that, so, from what I remember. And he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house. So whose father?
His father.
His father.
Yeah. but-
Moses' father, right?
Yeah.
Do we even know who that is? I guess somebody do.
Let's see,
It had to be tied back to Abraham,
I guess if we look back in the genealogy.
Yeah,
but nobody particularly important right now.
apparently not. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, why they didn't mention, why Stephen didn't mention Moses' true genealogy.
Yeah.
Interesting. But anyways, it was Pharaoh's daughter that adopted him and brought him up as her own son. And why would Stephen bring that up? I mean, he's setting this case here, right? So why is he bringing these things up? Is he like trying to create a legitimacy for Moses, or just reminding them of the struggles?
Yeah, they would relate,
They would relate to this, right? I mean, these aren't just vain words, you know.
He's laying the facts out.
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, these are indisputable
yeah,
facts,
and
you know?
kind of one of those things that often when you do speeches, you state facts to prove your knowledge of the subject.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, you're laying that groundwork.
Yeah.
Not so much to tell them new facts,
No.
but to lay out that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
These are facts that we all know, and I also know
Yeah, true.
here. 22, Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. So Egyptians weren't dummies after all. As a matter of fact, from what I remember and what I've learned a little bit is how advanced they were, especially for the times that we understand. Assuming you don't believe in aliens came earlier. That's another story. So it wasn't more than just, by the way, the facts of measurements and stuff, but wisdom of how to apply those facts, right, and how to do them. And he was mighty in his words and deeds. So again, laying out that. So new paragraph 23. So there's a timeline here. He starts talking about when he was 40 years old, and then gets into this, the Moses transgression, if I can say that, or his first real problem. And again, remember that this is Stephen recounting what a whole lot of scripture in Old Testament had already described, right?
This is hundreds of,
Yeah, hundreds of years later, yeah. Here, so he's really kind of recapping, not giving historical accuracy to, every detail, right? So this is just a summary of that. So what happened? What is in 23? What is going on here? And 25, 23, 20, what is that? Sorry. Oh, 23, 24, and 25.
The 25 really stood out to me. You know, he did something, figured it was okay that they would understand.
Yeah.
Although, interestingly, did Moses, in the sequence of actual chronology, know already that he was going to be
Yeah.
the deliverer?
one question is when did Moses know, and I probably should know this, if it's that he was not Pharaoh's son? Well, Pharaoh's daughter's, you know what I mean? Whatever that, Pharaoh's daughter found him, so
Yeah.
Pharaoh's grandson.
Well, they went and fetched his mother to nurse him, so I guess there's a
Yeah,
good
but that
chance.
was accidental, because I don't know if Pharaoh's daughter knew that was his mother. She just said, I need a nursemaid,
Right.
and they found this
Well,
woman.
where I was going
Who's
with that
nursing?
is, it probably, that's probably how he found out, though, while his mother was nursing him.
Yeah, but do we have any record? And I'm just asking this generically. Did he know he was, my point is it says he wanted to see his brother. Did he know that at that time? That he was not the Pharaoh's son?
Evidently he did. But, I mean, I guess
Well,
that's all we have to do.
I mean, if you read 23, and I don't know how your translation puts it, but when he was approaching the age of 40, it entered his mind to visit the brethren, right? So to me, that means this is the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, right? This is God intervening in the life of Moses and saying, go visit your brethren.
Right, I understand that, but my
Yeah.
point is,
When did he know?
yeah, was that the revelation at 40 years old that
Well-
these are my brethren, or if I have similarities here that I don't, it's internal, I can't, or did he actually know from a young age that he was adopted, yada yada, and
I think that's all we know, is what we just
I
said.
don't know if it's somewhere else. I'm not
No,
a
it's
scholar to know that.
It's
Yeah.
not.
I do know you can identify an Egyptian person by their physical looks
Yeah.
and a Jewish person.
Yeah.
There are physical differences, whether it's the scope of the nose, the skin tone,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Egyptians were very dark colored in
Yes.
skin.
Yeah.
So, and most of the Hebrews were of not.
Yeah.
So it could just be that, hey mom, or hey nursemaid, why am I different than everybody else?
Yeah.
And, it slowly got revealed.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
I'm just curious.
I don't think he went to the Murray Povich show and, had an expose and,
Yeah, this
Well,
is-
according to
who your
Disney-
father is.
According to Disney,
Yeah.
the older brother, actually told him, "You're not even of our,"
That's what siblings do.
Yeah.
You're adopted.
Well, now my daughter actually told that to Kevin, so, and he really thought that for a few years.
Vicky, go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
I'm gonna say maybe he said to Pharaoh's daughter, as he was older, "Well, who's my dad? Well, that's my father." She might have even said something to him, "Well, I found you in bulrushes," or "I raised you." No telling.
If you look here, if you read 23, 24, and 25.
Right.
So in 23 it says that it entered his mind to go visit his brethren. So he goes and saw one of them being mistreated unjustly, and he defends and took vengeance for the oppressed by striking down the Egyptians. And he supposed that his brethren understood that God was granting them deliverance through him, but they did not understand. So evidently, at that point, from what Stephen is saying, he knew.
Right.
So, is it 23? Was 23 the Great Awakening? Where where it says
Into
God
his mind.
entered his mind. To
My
go
Bible
visit
says his
brethren.
heart.
There you go.
It must-
So
must
was
have
that the
been.
point where God tells him,
You're the deliverer.
you're the deliverer
Yeah.
at 40 years old?
Yeah, even before the burning bush,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
way before, 40 years before.
Because if he was a youngster, say 4 or 5 years old, roughly where you start understanding things, and his mom or his nursemaid, whatever, told him that he was, logic tells me, looking back, that you wouldn't want to publicize that. Because the king edict, 4 years is nothing. And the king's edict, I don't know if it expired or got forgotten, but I wonder if it could be, because the king's edict was put out for a reason, to get rid of this deliverer that they were talking about. So if they would say, "Oh, you're the one and you slipped through the cracks, I want to kill you right now."
Well, I don't think I think the reason why the edict was put out is because they were growing too much. The population, this was a population control issue. I don't think
Yeah, I
this
go
was.
back up, maybe I'm confusing.
Yeah, you're confusing Herod and
Yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, I think this was more or less, they started
It was
growing
just
so
a
much that the
population
population was growing so much that they were actually having more people, more Jews than they were Egyptians. And so he saw it as a threat, that the Jewish population was growing, so he said, we gotta nip this.
If that may, I'm not challenging, but if that's true, then my little concern about letting the kid know about it,
Right.
making it public is not a big deal, I would think.
Yeah, because they could have always said he wasn't, yeah, we raised him, we adopted him, but he wasn't very old anyway.
Yeah.
And
Could we
and
let the first
truthfully,
one-
here's would his daughter even have known that it was the firstborn?
Yeah.
Pharaoh's daughter?
I mean, I'm sure there's not a name tag on the
Exactly.
basket that said, yeah, here's my firstborn.
Right.
Well, in her defense, she let the first baby go by, so she took the second one, so it wasn't the first one.
Really?
I heard of that.
I think that's a Jayism.
Is that a Jayism?
Oh, I was trying to think of the connection.
I'm kidding, guys.
That threw me off. That threw me off. I was going,
I actually swallowed that hook.
Yeah, I was racking my brain to figure.
I had also heard of, I don't know if it was a sermon priest or whatever, that the basket that they had put Moses in was actually a burial, was like a coffin burial
Oh, really?
type thing.
Oh, okay.
Because the parents, because they would have had to kill the baby, and rather than kill the baby, they were basically sending him off down the
down the river.
whatever.
Sending them down the river.
And so, you know, that was the, and maybe she knew that, she could have known that way that it was the firstborn, because they wouldn't have done that otherwise, but that's just
The
something
baby was
I heard. I
getting
mean,
too old to conceal him. They were gonna know that there was a
Yeah.
baby there, so now it's time to
Right.
move him out, yeah.
And so, 26, on the following day, he appeared to them as they were quarreling and tried to reconcile them. So who's the thems in quarreling?
Some Hebrews.
Yeah, just Hebrews, right? His brothers, if you will, because that's kind of the tie-in here in 23
Right.
to visit his brothers. So
Right.
I assume that's the them that is going on there. Again, this is a summary. As they were quarreling, tried to reconcile them. So we got salvation and we got reconciliation going on here. I think those are key words to understanding the story that's really going on. What Stephen is trying to talk about is that there is this salvation that is offered and a reconciliation back to God that is going on here. And I think there's a tie-in there. But Moses says, "Men, you are brothers. Why do you wrong each other?" And so what is their response?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Why are you
Who
interrupting
made
this?
you boss?
You made
Yeah.
you boss. Have we heard that phrase before?
Yep.
I think I've said that.
Yeah, Joseph.
Yeah. Apparently, striking down the Egyptian was not a private matter, because in 28, they knew, "Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday?" So they,
Word got around.
yeah, apparently, somehow, some way, it got around. It was not a super private thing here, I guess.
And it didn't say that these two that were fighting was one of the ones that the
Was being
Egyptian was
Oppressing.
oppressing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point too. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. And so after their response, Moses fled and became an exile in the land of Midian. So he's, summarizing that.
And he had two sons.
And he has two sons.
Well, if you think about verse 28, when that happens, basically, he loses both sides, right?
Yeah.
He can't go back to the Egyptians anymore,
Right?
right? Because now it's, people know he's killed an Egyptian, right? But then again, his revelation about being deliverer is now being denied because they're saying, we ain't gonna follow you. Who are you?
Right.
You killed this guy. Who are you gonna now come tell us that you're gonna deliver us? So now he's basically isolated, and so therefore he does what he
I
would
always
do.
wondered about that because I would imagine in that time, Pharaoh's son or nephew or anybody related to Pharaoh could do what he wanted to the lowly Jews who were not even as good as cattle. I'm making this up, of course. And I think Moses didn't really feel fully like Pharaoh's relative because I'm sure, I think, that if Pharaoh's son actually killed a Jew, so what? Just sweep it under the rug. You know what I mean? And I don't think Moses thought he had that protection. I'm really stretching here because I don't know for sure. Rome had a bunch of laws on, Roman citizenship and all that. I don't know if Egyptians did. But in these days of slave and stuff, I guarantee you slaves had died and under the whip or whatever, and it's like, oh, bring another one in. It's no big deal.
Yeah, well, I think the fact is here that You know, here was an Egyptian taken up for a Jew,
Yeah,
and you know,
but he killed another Egyptian, that's.
yeah,
that's
well,
part
yeah,
of it.
well, that's part, well, that's the
So I
whole
don't know
deal,
what the
right?
laws were at the time.
Yeah, well, but then again, you've got the Jews, even though he did that, basically still rejecting him, even though he was showing himself to be a savior for the oppressed.
At least
Right.
there's one guy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
representative of the whole Hebrew
Yeah.
nation.
And then that quarrel, the one that was being the one in the row was the one that accused him, well, who made you the ruler? It doesn't say the other guy.
So do you think Moses thought that actually God had made him the ruler at that time? That in
Oh.
his heart, in his mind,
I think,
that that's part of that, that he thought he was the
He was set
Redeemer?
aside somehow.
Yeah, that's-
Already, even before the burning bush, he knew it somehow, like we just said, starting at the earlier verse than we would have thought.
yeah,
Yeah.
verse 23, I think that was God's indication to him is that, you know, you're gonna be a deliverer.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't know the whole deal.
No,
No.
And interestingly, one commentary I was just looking at took the last phrase of verse 25, but they did not understand, and it made a big deal of that phrase.
right,
And
yes.
it's saying, you know, whether you look back at Joseph and his brothers and family not understanding, and then he became a deliverer, Moses, same thing, and then of course Christ.
Right.
Yes.
That did not
When
understand.
Moses fled, he might have thought, well, I thought I was gonna be a deliverer, but I guess now it's changed or something.
Yeah,
Until the burning
I really
bush, he might have thought, well, that's, I don't know, I had this inclination, but I guess.
Yeah,
So
it's
was
true.
the-
I had to go get it realigned.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, that's right.
So do you think this whole paragraph here is, the accusation is, you elders, you council, you didn't understand? You know, that's the accusation I'm bringing up, is all of the
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
They didn't understand, just like you don't understand
About me.
about me,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
about this Christ, the guy that I keep talking about.
Yeah,
That's right.
but he's saying it without saying it.
Yeah, he's saying it without saying it.
But Stephen also, knowing the seriousness of the situation, could have said things to get himself out of this.
Oh, yeah.
But yet he's bold and
Yeah.
he's sticking up to,
That's
when
right.
he knows,
Yeah.
in spite of that.
Yeah, he paid a price for it too.
Yep.
Yeah,
Hey, that's jumping ahead.
yeah. He definitely did.
And so we're going to leave it at where he became the father of two sons, and we're going to